If you're tired, stressed, or depressed, it's important that we look at more than just your psychology. We also need to dive deep into your biochemistry to uncover underlying triggers that are causing you emotional ups and downs, brain fog, and fatigue at an underlying level. So, in this week's episode, we're going to talk to Julia Cheek of Everlywell, which provide at-home health kit lab tests to find out how food sensitivities, adrenal fatigue, and stress can impact your mental health. Suffering from depression and getting no answers, I packed up my life and went on a 90-day mission to find help from the world's top biohackers, neuroscientists, and doctors. And now I'm here to help you biohack your mind and body for success. Welcome to Becoming Unstoppable, lifestyle hacks for your body, mind, and business. Before we dive in, be sure to hit like, subscribe, share, and comment with the word unstoppable under this video so you can learn how to win $4,990 worth in biohacking tools and wearable devices to help you achieve peak performance, including the food sensitivity health test kit as featured in this video. Conditions apply. Note, this video is not sponsored or endorsed by Everlywell. When I was struggling with severe depression and fatigue, I was unable to get answers from my doctors as to the root cause of it. I was told most people never work out why they're fatigued or depressed, and that I looked fit and healthy, I should be fine. This couldn't be further from the truth. I was seriously ill and had to find my own answers. So I chose to undertake various lab tests to get to the bottom of my depression and take back control of my health. On my 90-day mission to biohack my mind and body back to health for my new book Unstoppable, I came across Everlywell, a company that provides at-home health kit lab tests. You order your kit online, it gets delivered to your home, and then you simply provide a blood sample. You then get your results online in a well-designed dashboard that's easy to understand. These tests use the same laboratories that doctors use in the US. The difference, it saves time and money and explains your results in detail online. You can even download your results and take to your doctor. Julia, the founder and CEO, won one of the largest investments ever made on ABC's Shark Tank for a solo female entrepreneur. Shark, Laurie Grainer, extended a $1 million line of credit in exchange for a 5% stake. My jaw hit the floor when I got my lab results back, as I was finally able to uncover the various triggers that were causing my depression and fatigue. These results drove me to reach out to Julia and Everlywell's medical director, Dr. Francis, via a Skype interview to find out more. Surprisingly, Julia's experience was very similar to mine. She started the company after suffering symptoms of chronic fatigue and unexplainable aches and pains. Join Julia, Dr. Francis, and I for an in-depth conversation on everything from stress, depression, food and gluten sensitivity, adrenal fatigue, diet and symptoms, the need for personalized medicine, and how the normal range for results is defined, and why you may not be getting the answers you need from your doctor. This extended episode is well worth watching to the very end.
So I was a typical overworked, late 20s, corporate America kind of woman, trying to figure out what was making me feel about myself. And I had symptoms of chronic fatigue, unexplainable aches and pains. I was restless. I had a lot of anxiety, and ultimately, these were all due to basic hormone imbalances and adrenal gland imbalances. But I spent this period, this odyssey of like 6 months, going to tons of different doctors to try to get testing done and pinpoint the issues. The doctors themselves were all excellent, but the problem was that they ordered a bunch of tests. I was never given access to the results. I didn't even know what tests were run. And then even if I was able to get them to send me the paper, I didn't have explanations. And then I started getting these bills coming in from Quest and LabCorp every few months because I was on a high deductible plan. And I started figuring out that the high deductible non-coverage situation for Americans was just growing dramatically, and that the majority of Americans are having to pay so much more for these basic services, and the services actually relate to them not at all. So I really wanted to say, how can we use technology and digital health to disrupt the traditional experience for consumers and help them get access to this testing in an easier way? And that can be access to tests they want, access to a more convenient process, or access to at one price, a transparent price. You know exactly what you're going to pay, and we won't charge you again. And that message has resonated just with thousands and thousands of people. Doctors mean well. I think that doctors want to make sure that their patients are not sort of believing Google MD, for lack of a better term. But I think that, and unfortunately, there has been a vicious cycle in healthcare, and a lot of it is driven by those who reimburse for services, in particular the insurance companies, where there is this standard that has kind of gone above and beyond being able to open up our eyes to other possibilities. And that standard is good, right? We like evidence-based medicine, but not everything is going to fit into a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial, which is what the pharma industry has sort of set as the gold standard. And so it makes doctors very leery of anything that has not gone through that sort of rigorous type of study approved by the FDA, you know, and again, it's trying to minimize harm to their patients. But there is definitely a group of physicians who say, look, it's not all black and white. We certainly in medicine don't know everything. Let's look at how we treated conditions 50 years ago to how we're treating them today. It's going to be different than how we treat them in 10, 20, or another 50 years. And so there's definitely a group of physicians who are much more open to conditions or illnesses or syndromes that aren't necessarily textbook yet. Things like adrenal fatigue, things like food sensitivities. Just because we don't have a body of evidence that is proof positive for insurance companies doesn't necessarily mean that they don't exist, and it doesn't mean that people don't suffer from them. And so I think that there is often a gap between what has been clinically proven with controlled studies versus what our patients actually experience, and where those studies need to go in order to generally convince the overall medical community that these are founded conditions. I can tell you that I've had women come to see me who have been told because of one or two lab values, no, you don't have polycystic ovarian syndrome, yet they have all the symptoms of it. So patients don't always follow textbooks. Patients don't always follow lab results to the standard value. And I will tell you that the majority of normal ranges for lab results are based on 70 kilogram men. Well, none of my patients follow that. They're all women. So again, I think that doctors sometimes get so set in, if it doesn't follow the strict criteria, it can't possibly be real. And just in treating women, I've had to my whole career step back and say, look, you're not a 70 kilogram man. That doesn't mean that you don't have a thyroid dysfunction just because you don't fall into these two ranges. If it is not going to be a reimbursed test and the patient is going to get stuck with a bill, the patient isn't unfortunately going to go and badmouth their insurance company. They're going to badmouth the doctor because the doctor's the one that ordered the test. And so physicians have become very much aware of making sure that they're ordering testing that will be reimbursed by insurance so that the patient doesn't get upset in the end with the doctor who ordered the test.
And so with thyroid specifically,
there are very limited tests that you can order based on symptoms that the patient presents with. So I'll say that our thyroid panel is actually going to look at 4 biomarkers for thyroid dysfunction that sort of runs the gamut of what could be wrong with the thyroid. If a woman came to my office with a complaint of fatigue, weight gain, and hair loss or cold intolerance, I can start by ordering one of those biomarkers and knowing for certain that it'll be reimbursed because it's screening for a problem. But unless that one comes back abnormal, I may not be able to get the other 3 covered.
That one being TSH, which is the high-level thyroid stimulating hormone,
right?
But is only a sort of directional indicator,
right?
And you could still have a major thyroid problem even if you have
a normal TSH.
Years ago, I was prescribed medication for kidney infections. I was scheduled for a kidney stone removal that they stopped 12 hours before because they returned the x-rays. They were so confident they returned the x-rays and I didn't have one. And so they stopped the surgery. I had CAT scans, MRIs, and I was told I just had pulled a back muscle and that I just needed to relax. And, and I understand in some ways. I was very frustrated. I'm always about what are people's incentives and what are they trying to achieve. And so I wasn't mad at the doctors themselves. I was mad at the institutions. I was mad at the pressure put on doctors and how they have to operate and how they're incentivized, and they're often doing the best that they can, but that is with their own constructs, right? But that is at the end of the day not achieving the goal. And so I ended up, once I got all this data, to your point, I got all the lab results. Some of them were mailed to me in the U.S. mail, and I took them to a functional medicine doctor and to an acupuncturist, and they found all these areas. And it was certainly my cortisol had completely gone just off the radar wacky, but my vitamin D was dangerously low, my magnesium, my vitamin B6, my vitamin B12, my iron, and I was low on all of those, but nobody had put the picture together. I was not low enough. But it was this comprehensive set of things. And so I just was I almost had very, very bad treatment as a result of not pinpointing the right issues. And looking back, it seems so ridiculous that I almost underwent a procedure when what I really needed to do was just make some lifestyle changes. And that, I think, perfectly reflects this drastic gap in care and what's happening.
And, one of the things that we do try to mention, and that we're working on sort of changing with our lab, is testosterone varies by age. And so we have a wide normal range because it's for a large age gap. Within that age gap, even though the result may be normal, it may not be normal for your age. And so we try to make sure people understand that while this is how we report this out, please take a look at what the sort of age match. We have the table, right? The age match testosterone is for your age, to see if maybe you're too low for your age. Or conversely, if you're too high for your age, which can cause other symptoms. How are sort of the normal ranges set in general? Mm-hmm. It's based on population studies.
Yeah.
And so, we have got population studies for everything, for mineral levels, for vitamin levels, for normal, what cholesterol should be. When you look at cholesterol, the population studies are based upon who developed heart disease versus who didn't. So at what ranges is that considered normal versus elevated risk for heart disease? So these normal ranges are really set by society and set by population studies. Within the lab, the reference ranges, those are set based upon biological variability within your body. How much can that marker vary from day to day, from hour to hour within your body and still be considered normal? The standard guinea pig in medicine has always been the 70 kilogram man. And I hate to say it, but it's always been the 70 kilogram white man. Now, obviously, we are trying to look at different populations because we don't all fit that mold. I will say that sort of the ADA has done a very good job at separating out pregnant and lactating women, because obviously what their body needs and what is considered normal for them is vastly different than the standard 70 kilogram man. So we do have some population studies that have been separated out by gender, by race, and by pregnancy status. How we look at a body is really changing. And just in general speaking, medically, pharmacogenetics has made a huge difference in how doctors practice. We know that there are racial differences, in particular with lipid-lowering agents. But even within the same race of people, how someone's liver breaks down a certain medication and whether or not that's going to be useful is different. And so pharmacogenetics has really taken it to the next level, where we're realizing we used to be able to group things, but now we almost can't. Now everything really has to be personalized medicine in order to benefit that individual patient.
This test changes people's lives, and so we publish those reviews, and it's just really powerful. It does have to be used in context of appropriate understanding of the test, but it's definitely one of our most popular ones.
We've got women and men who, anything from, for women, hormone imbalances have actually improved, and they've become regular cycles. skin conditions resolve. I mean, we're talking people with psoriatic arthritis that medication traditionally couldn't help, and they found foods that were causing what they consider to be inflammatory flares, and their psoriatic arthritis is all but cured.
Asthma, we have a particular customer, similar story. I don't know if yours was as a result of a food intervention, but a customer who said they had struggled with asthma for 20 years.
Yeah.
And took this test, and a number of people, what's interesting is almost everyone says, my doctor told me I should try this out. And it's almost like a last resort.
It is.
It's well, if you still aren't feeling well, feel free to go pay the money on Everlywell. It's helped some of my patients, right? But then the doctor is a little bit absolved, which is a little bit good, right? They're saying this is something you can go try if you want. But it's a really good cycle because it's starting to then go back to the physicians and saying, oh my gosh, this product has really helped people.
Right.
And it's worked.
Right. Other conditions that we hear very commonly, bloating, migraines, sleep disturbance. We even have people who've had their anxiety improve because of dietary changes, depression improve because of dietary changes. So it runs the gamut. And for people who use the results in the proper way, I do think that the vast majority of the customers do get benefit.
And look, I mean, we aren't here to say our food sensitivity test is the absolute solution for all of these different issues, but the fact that it is one option that we've made affordable and accessible to people who want to be able to not be overwhelmed these dietary restrictions that are impossible to implement on your own. And to me, the idea that people should not have access to a service at an affordable price that they want to try that's physician mediated is, we sell cigarettes, we sell Coca-Cola, we sell all kinds of things that kill you, and you're not going to give people access to life-saving products potentially that they can administer themselves. To me, it's about access and ownership and empowering consumers to do that in a controlled and safe way, obviously.
Right. And again, I wasn't implying that food sensitivity is the cause of depression in this world. It's not. But I do think that when someone is being evaluated for symptoms of depression, we don't look at their diet traditionally as medical doctors, which sort of confuses me. And it sounds silly, but we have that old saying, you are what you eat. And why we don't look at diet as part of the puzzle when we're trying to figure out why someone has the symptoms that they do, I think it really does a disservice to our patients. Between all of the additives and chemicals in our food system right now, I think food is probably one of the biggest causes of people being unhealthy. I will say that at Everlywell, we are embarking on doing research on food sensitivities, and we are actually going to be using our customers
with their opting in.
Right. So we are going to give our customers the opportunity to be part of one of the largest research studies on food sensitivities, mostly because the literature is very lacking, and it's also controversial. Half of the publications say using an IgG sensitivity to plan a food elimination diet helps people with symptoms, and half say it's bogus science. And so we really want to take our customer experience along with their food sensitivity results and see how can we correlate symptoms and symptom relief with taking their results and planning the food elimination diet.
What we find so interesting is one of the reasons that the American Association of Allergy and Immunology does not endorse this is because many of the studies confirm that sensitivities cannot predict allergies, which we 100% agree with.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very different biological response than an anaphylactic allergy. But what's very concerning is the amount of food sensitivities reported in the global population has increased over the last several decades, and the entire lack of research completely on the subject.
Right.
And so we're launching this in the next quarter, and we hope to have it. It'll take several quarters to do correctly, but we hope to be able to publish the results at the end of this year or in first quarter of next year. You could also have a mid-level reactivity that for you is causing severe symptoms, if that's the one thing for you that was mid-level, and for someone else, they may have 20 high reactivity things, but that's just sort of how their body reacts to things, and then it's not as it's not as debilitating for them.
Right, exactly.
So that's why we say you have to do this with a elimination diet, and you shouldn't just assume that because it's important to have guidance and to actually test the reactions in your body.
Right. The other thing I will say, and I say this all the time, and I say this to my patients in my practice, and I say this to the customers with Everlywell, normal results is more information. Right? It's taking a possible big list of what could be causing you to feel this way and starting to eliminate reasons until you can finally get down to what may be the root cause of your symptoms. In general, the functional medicine community, the nutrition community, they know coconut is beneficial, right? It is better for us than alternatives, but that doesn't mean it's better for everybody. And that goes down to that personalized sort of approach to what is the best for you. Food sensitivity test, when you use those results as a guide for your elimination diet, once you figure out the foods that cause symptoms in your body, now you know, okay, this particular diet plan would work great for me because I have learned that I have had to cut back on these foods, or this one may be better. And so I think it's just sort of taking this big nebulous of possibilities and narrowing it down to what's best for you. The first thing that you should do whenever you're experiencing a symptom that you think is related to a food, if you're not going to do a food sensitivity test, is to do a food diary. Food diaries are extremely helpful in giving people information as to what they're ingesting and where the correlation is between foods ingested and symptoms experienced. For women, it's a little bit more complicated because unfortunately bloating is a natural part of the hormonal cycle each month. And so for women, it's even more important to understand temporally, is the bloating just part of my natural menstrual cycle, or am I experiencing it at times when I shouldn't, and could that be related to food?
When I was in the Northeast going to business school, I just was in these dark winters, and I would start to get, I'm not a very depressive type personality, and I would start to get this sense of like depression and not being able to move forward and all those things, and it was totally related to a lack of vitamin D. And for me, the power of vitamin D alone, I think, is vastly undercommunicated. Even people who are taking, and you have to be sure, like, just because you're taking a multivitamin, I have to take 2 large amounts of vitamin D supplements every day. And that process alone is so surprising at how much that can affect your everyday being and your happiness and your mental health. And I'm just so astonished sometimes at how simple, and it's not that it solves every problem, but how some of these simple solutions should be the first go-to. And it's really amazing. And so for me, that's been why I'm so passionate about this, like you are, is these are not expensive solutions, and they're so poorly understood by most of the population. And I do think good supplements is an important message as well. They have to be high quality. People need to know that they're not regulated in the same way, and there needs to be testing for those. I think inflammation as a whole health issue is one of the most under-researched and vast problems today, because it is psychological stress, physical stress, dietary stress. The amount of inflammatory just symptoms that people have today have grown exponentially.
Right. And we do have an inflammatory test where people can actually look at the CRP level in their body to see whether or not they may have chronic elevated inflammatory states.
Yeah, so I love the sleep and stress test. I will say it's the hardest one to communicate to consumers, and here's why. It measures melatonin, cortisol, and cortisone. So for me, having gone through adrenal fatigue, mapping your cycle over the course of one 24-hour period is critical, because you need to know how do your levels perform throughout the day, both for melatonin and cortisol, be able to say, okay, do I have maybe an adrenal issue? What's great about it is typically if you're trying to do this test at 4 times throughout the day, you're going to a lab at 4 different points, and there's no lab that's open like at 10 o'clock at night. So it's a urine test. You can do it from home. We map your levels over a chart and show you where the normal levels would be. I think what's hard about this test, though, and I don't know if we have a solution to it yet, is, as you know, the only solutions, other than maybe a melatonin supplement, the only solution for a cortisol pattern that is flip-flopped or flatlined is lifestyle changes. And so people don't feel satisfied, right? They can't take a supplement for cortisol. It is literally de-stress, meditate,
and
exercise, all the things you should be doing anyway. And so I think that, it's a powerful panel, but it's not quite as actionable because the recommendations are just so general.
They're so general. Stress not only causes the adrenal gland to increase cortisol production, stress also affects your sleep pattern, which goes back and negatively feeds back on your adrenal glands as well. It's really any stress.
Yeah.
So it's psychological, it's emotional, it's physical. We can sometimes see abnormal cortisol patterns in high endurance athletes. And so just any stress that the body perceives, it can alter your cortisol. So to actually have a clinically symptomatic sort of candida overgrowth, you have to be very immunocompromised. So we're talking people who have actually got measurable levels of white cells in their body that are below the normal range for a normal immune function. So, there are definitely individuals that fall in that category, people that are on chronic steroids, people that are post-chemo, people that are immunocompromised through HIV. The candida overgrowth that they experience is profound and I think very different than the candida overgrowth that people that don't fall into that category can experience. That doesn't mean that those individuals, even though their candida may not be so clinically elevated as people who are immunocompromised, are not somehow affected by it. If you have someone who takes high levels or prolonged levels of antibiotics, it can actually cause an imbalance in the gut biome, which includes not just yeast, but also bacteria. And so you can have either an overgrowth of yeast, or you can actually have an overgrowth of bad bacteria in the gut because the antibiotic has killed off the normal bacteria of the gut. Depending on the antibiotic, there are certain antibiotics that are very well known to cause yeast overgrowth, and then there are certain antibiotics that are very well known to cause a bacterial overgrowth.
First of all, I think the understanding of what celiac disease is versus a gluten sensitivity is vastly misrepresented. So celiac disease requires usually a combination of complex testing plus a biopsy to diagnose, and it's an equivalent of an allergy, if you will. And so a gluten sensitivity obviously is very different. So we will have people who say, I'm celiac, but I don't have an IgG reactivity, which is
totally normal.
And then we also have people who say, I thought I was sensitive to gluten, but I didn't have a sensitivity. I mean, part of the issue here is if you've already eliminated gluten and haven't eaten it for 2 years, that goes against our sort of testing process in terms of having the food in your diet, then eliminating it, then reintroducing it based on your results. And so that challenge we run into is people wanting to validate something they've already eliminated, which is just the wrong way to do it.
It's the reverse.
You have that. We thought they had sensitivity, they eat gluten, and then they still find that they have yeast or wheat or one of the sensitivities, and the issue is really because it's hard to separate out many products that have other types of carbohydrates from gluten. And so Marra spends a lot of time sharing with people, what are sources of gluten or wheat and yeast, and how do you really eliminate those?
Right. I guess the best way to say it's not all about gluten. And so that's why you have individuals who have gone gluten-free, but they may still be symptomatic because in other foods that they're eating, they're ingesting something that they have an IgG sensitivity to.
Yes.
They've eliminated the gluten because they thought that was it. But if they all of a sudden start increasing their nutritional yeast supplements and they have a problem with yeast, they really haven't done themselves any good. And that's why I say if someone is going to go down the road of really looking at foods as source of symptoms, doing a food sensitivity test is really a good first start. And it's a really good first start before you begin eliminating foods. Because once you start eliminating foods, you're going to alter your sensitivity the reactivity level.
Right.
My biggest takeaway from this experiment was that I wasn't seeing the right kinds of doctors. They were taking the same standard tests and were inclined to treat the symptoms, not the causes. I chose to take the testosterone test as my naturopath at the time had requested it via my GP. My GP had refused. I was floored at my results. I was at the very low end of the normal range for a male of my age, which can result in depressive symptoms. Furthermore, I discovered that I was severely depleted in vitamin D, which can also trigger depression. I also uncovered via the food sensitivity test that I was severely sensitive to coconut. I began using coconut oil daily under the guise of all of the hype around it. I cut it out of my diet for 1 full month before I accidentally consumed it in a Thai curry. It was only after 3 straight days of feeling tired, depressed, and angry that I'd realized that I'd accidentally ingested it. The food sensitivity test was by far one of the best experiments I conducted for my new book. There's no way I would have worked this out by myself. It's critical that we validate why we feel the way we feel so we can finally biohack our way back to health based on science, not guesswork. Our biochemistry is as unique as a fingerprint and should be taken into consideration when we're personalizing healthcare with the help of the right doctor. So what did you take away from this episode? I'd love to know. Share your comment below. Now, if you'd love to win $4,990 worth in biohacking tools and wearable devices to help you achieve peak performance, including the food sensitivity health test kit as featured here, comment with the word unstoppable below to learn how to enter our giveaway, or visit areyouunstoppable.com to enter immediately and find out what success identity type you are so you can increase your energy and achieve more in less time. In the meantime, be sure to grab a copy of my brand new book Unstoppable and have a great week.